When the centre started more than 17 years ago, celiac disease was massively underdiagnosed in the United States. Our response to this was to develop research protocols that demonstrated what the face of celiac disease was like and how patients could get correctly diagnosed. A direct result of our research was to markedly increase the rate of celiac disease diagnosis. It would not have been possible without the tremendous philanthropy that we've received. Therefore, our donors can share in this credit. Together, we've changed the lives of thousands of individuals. However, there is so much more work to do.
"162 games is a long season. Recovery is critical when you're facing the best players in the world. But every day I was sore and exhausted. I never knew why." One of the most difficult things about trying to play baseball is that you play every day. People like to call it the grind or whatever it is. And it tears you down throughout the course of the season. And what I noticed is that I was getting torn down maybe a little bit more than others. I wasn't having a dramatic injury, but it was just that slow decline, pretty big weight fluctuations, that soreness, fatigue, always feeling dehydrated. I always spent so much time stretching and getting my body ready before I even went out on the field to practice or whatever, because I really felt like if I didn't do that, something was going to tear or pop, or I felt so tight and rigid. And I'm seeing different orthopedists and different doctors, and at no point in the conversation is anyone bringing up celiac disease.
Celiac disease has historically been underdiagnosed, particularly in the United States as compared to Europe. And we've been tirelessly going to physician groups, patient groups, anyone who's willing to listen to us and talk about the underdiagnosis rate of celiac disease, the many symptoms that celiac disease can manifest, and the ways it can masquerade other illnesses.
I started experiencing some pain in the inside of my foot. And for about a month, we didn't really treat it. I was just walking on it, trying to manage to the best that I could, until the pain was so bad I basically couldn't walk. We got an MRI. It showed that I had the stress fracture in my foot, and I was put in a boot, and the pain, it only got worse.
It was very perplexing to me, being his father and a physician, as to why he would have a stress fracture without really known injury. So I ordered him a bone densitometry test, and it did confirm that he had osteoporosis at the age of 19 in his forearm. As a rheumatologist, I know that nobody 19 years old gets osteoporosis unless there's some underlying cause or reason. Embarrassingly, celiac was not on the top of my list. It wasn't on my list at all until I spoke to a colleague of mine who reminded me that celiac disease is a known cause of osteoporosis.
The work that the centre has done has resulted in this increased awareness of the relationship between osteoporosis and celiac disease. And now it is a standard of care for individuals who have osteoporosis to get tested for celiac disease.
I dance, I dream, I soar. But then I have nightmares. For me, it's not just a disease of the body. It's a disease that lives forever in your mind. I was about 15 and I was dancing 25 to 30 hours a week. Around that time, I stopped growing. I was 4'9" and really skinny and stopped going through puberty, and osteoporosis in my wrist and osteopenia in other areas. And after some blood work and an endoscopy, it was confirmed that I had celiac disease. We knew what was going on, but then the second half of that is figuring out how to live with it. We rehearse a lot out of town, usually sharing a kitchen in a cabin. The risk of cross-contamination is on my mind a lot. Over the last year or two, I've started having what I call gluten nightmares. I wake up in the middle of the night after a dream, panicking because in my dream I ate something that had gluten in it. It's obviously like deep in my subconscious somewhere, and I try not to let it stress me out or interfere with my life, but it is something I'm always thinking about.
We're just initiating a study where we're looking at the incidence of disordered eating in our patients, and also looking deeper in that in terms of what may be prompting some of these disordered eating patterns. Is it the anxiety about needing to avoid cross-contamination? Is it worrying about eating out, or being socially isolated? So we've taken the basis of our former research and actually started digging deeper to really get to some of the root causes. We really are one of the few centers doing really good nutrition research in celiac disease. It really isn't being done by trained dietitians anywhere else. What we don't want to do is, by putting someone on a gluten-free diet that is strict and rigid, that we're not exacerbating any other issues.
Individuals who were constantly asking questions, constantly checking labels, only eating at gluten-friendly restaurants, those individuals were associated with having a lower quality of life. And it really sort of hit home to us that we can't just focus on how do we get people to be adherent about their diet. We have to also concurrently figure out how can we maximize quality of life for people.
We actually completed a study, and what we found is that, particularly in boys, issues such as ADHD and anxiety were common, and particularly in girls, depression was common. It may be a consequence of the actual disease. It may actually, in some respects, be a consequence of the burden of treatment for the disease. We see a lot of these conditions flushing out in our patients. We may have children who become overly concerned about being gluten-free, and that may trigger additional layers of anxiety in those patients.
I was diagnosed with celiac disease about 5 years ago, and I found the Celiac Center at that time. I am working as one of the celiac dietitians at the center now. Even if you were diagnosed many, many years ago, it's still important to come into the center, see the physicians, see the nutritionists. We have the responsibility as the authority on celiac disease to make sure that we're translating all of the current research to our patients so that they're able to utilize that information in their daily lives.
My lab studies T cells and their role in human diseases. So T cells are immune cells that are really important in our ability to fight off infection. Celiac disease, for instance, is a disease caused by T cells. So our T cells inappropriately mount immune responses against gluten. My work is trying to understand how these T cells are functioning in celiac disease and causing this intestinal damage. Ultimately, our goal is to try to figure out ways that we can possibly intervene upon this process and prevent this from happening.
The Celiac Center here really publishes more papers and more research than any center across the country, not only because we have this amazing patient populations that gives us so much access to what's going on with the disease, but also because we have so many resources. We have an amazing biobank that allows us to do not only this clinical research, but translational research. Through that, we've been able to collaborate with basic science laboratories and publish really big, exciting things, new genes associated with celiac disease, new immune mechanisms associated with celiac disease, and that's all because of the resources we have here.
One of the things I love about the Celiac Disease Center is that they think from the cell to the psyche, because they think so broadly about celiac disease, and they're interested in researching every aspect from the intestine to the psychological impacts on an individual.
From cell to psyche makes perfect sense to me. The frustration of going to doctor after doctor, and they think they know enough to help you deal with it, and they don't. And I'm sure other patients tell them, you don't understand, and they don't understand, so how can they help you? And then when I finally got to go to the center, everybody understood.
Celiac disease is a highly prevalent condition, yet it's markedly underfunded compared to other diseases that aren't nearly as common as celiac disease. It just shouldn't be that other diseases that are less prevalent and have a lower mortality have more funding than celiac disease. It shouldn't be that way.
After spending time with Dr. Green and coming to find out that there's really no drug out there that I can take, there's nothing that's going to cure me. It's just a daily decision on what I eat and being very conscious about what I eat, what I'm putting in, to make sure, for lack of a better word, that I'm not poisoning myself. There is a mortality rate to it, unfortunately, and it's a very real disease.
The mortality rate for celiac disease is up here versus other GI disorders that are much lower, yet the funding disproportionately favors the other GI disorders. And why is that? There is no profit in celiac disease for the major drug companies at this point in time. This is very frustrating, and it should be very frustrating to patients with celiac disease.
There are many diseases that have been shown to have been dramatically altered by putting a lot of money into it. We have the classic example of polio, of hepatitis C, and of AIDS that were terrible things affecting enormous numbers of the population. And it wasn't until the patients got together and affected the funding process. Polio was eliminated, and all the funding for that came from donations. People aren't aware of that, actually. Hepatitis C is now a disease that can be controlled, and people live with AIDS. It hasn't taken away all these young people as it did 20 years ago. And that's what we've got to do with celiac disease. It's this whole process of increasing the volume of research, increasing the results, increasing the amount of knowledge about the disease, showing how important it is to get this process up to a level that makes a real difference. People with celiac disease have to take a personal interest in generating the research which is going to generate a cure and increase the quality of life of individuals with celiac disease.
Our center's annual budget is $2.9 million. Imagine if it were $10 million. This would result in a massive influx in researchers that would allow us to scale up our research activities and greatly increase the speed at which we can bring new developments and therapies to our patients.
I was feeling lost, and that was initially why I reached out. I became a patient in the process, and I have no regrets about that. Like, it's the best thing that happened to me. So, yes, the center needs funding, and it's going to the right doctors for this disease. It is a very humble operation, and they are doing good work, and that actually made me feel really good to know it's quality, humble, happy.
Through private philanthropy, if efforts can be made to help people out to save some lives, I think that's really important. Getting involved in the Celiac Center has been huge for me. I wake up, I feel so much better. I feel so much looser. I don't have to spend near the amount of time preparing to get on the field. It's been nothing short of life-changing.
Right now, we publish at the Celiac Disease Center, Columbia University, about 50 papers a year. That's 50 ways of chipping away at the problems facing our patients in our community. But imagine if we were to triple our budget. That would be the equivalent of 150 papers a year. And over time, that will add up. In 5 years, instead of 250 papers, we'd be contributing 750 papers. 750 ways of chipping away at this problem until the dam breaks, until we will have meaningful therapies, major breakthroughs for our patients.
Things cannot stop there. We've got to move forward with our program. We feel a great responsibility to change the lives of these individuals. We need to change the lives of your sons and daughters and all the future generations of those that have this condition.